To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant, and a time to pluck up that which is planted, a time to kill, and a time to heal, a time to break down, and a time to build up, a time to weep, and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to get, and a time to lose, a time to keep, and a time to cast away, a time to rend, and a time to sow, a time to keep silence, and a time to speak, a time to love, and a time to hate, a time of war, and a time of peace. Using the ill-gotten magical gains of her former mother, Anthea had the family's identities changed and had moved to another state. The cold, depressing rains of winter had given way to the warm rains of spring, which invigorated the earth and the life it contained. Crops, weeds, and wild flowers sprung up and fed the emerging infant pupa of the insects who ate them, matured, then transformed themselves into adult form by beginning of summer in the eternally changing dance of DNA. While the plant eaters were still young and plentiful, carnivore insects fed on the young immature insects who had become fat from ingesting great quantities of vegetable matter every day. The insect world wasn't the only animal group to nourish themselves with plant life during spring. Both wild deer and bison as well as husbanded cows became fat from ingesting the sugars created by plants as the chlorophyll soaked up the warm rays of the spring sun. The darkness of winter, after its proper season, had given way to spring. Anthea used part of her wealth first to bury to their former identities and then to completely obfuscate any clues that the family had ever been any different than what the public records indicated. Kayla's first name became Alice and her second became Kayla to differentiate her from her first daughter's name, whose first name was Kayla and second name Rose. If anyone who learned of her former daughter's existence asked about the resemblance in names, Anthea planned to tell them that the first Kayla was a black sheep who had disappeared with a never-do-well ex-con from a Texas prison and they had never heard from her since. She and Mark had named their daughter because of how much she looked like her ill-fortuned sister. The cover story was proof against the strongest investigation, including the FBI. If an agent asked about the similarity of names, Anthea would tell them how much her new little Kayla looked like her sweet little daughter before she went bad. After the move, she had conveniently lost the address and phone number of her friend who she had called her aunt in Texas. If pressed, she would admit that the so-called aunt was really a fundamentalist religious group who she thought might be Baptist, but that she might be mistaken. Anthea would tell whoever asked that she had answered a letter in a personals column about wayward children and the group had seemed to be honest and upstanding citizens. Kayla had complained about them in her letters to her, but she hadn't indicated she was being abused other than being made to go to church twice a week, i.e., Wednesday and Sundays, as well as go to Bible study on Saturdays and Sunday school on Sunday afternoons. She had the impression from Kayla's letters that the group ran its own religious school which Kayla was attending until she ran off with an ex-con. No, she hadn't kept any of her daughter's letters or any communication with the religious group after her daughter had run off with the crook. She had thrown all of Kayla's letters away on the day that she had read the letter from Kayla saying that she had taken up with a criminal. All she would admit to about her former daughter was that she had gotten a letter from her saying that she was leaving the home with a man she had met and had a prison history. She had pitched the letter into the trash along with all the other letters and communications about her daughter's welfare and never heard from Kayla again. By her own choice, Anthea would say, Kayla was on her own. Anthea had done her best by her, but the child had chosen a path of wickedness despite all she had done for her. Anthea had her husband and baby girl to care for, and had put aside any thoughts of the wayward daughter she had tried to raise as a good Christian and honest, tax-paying citizen. From the time that she had gotten into high school, the devil had gotten into her and had changed her into a different person. Maybe she had gotten on drugs when she was in high school, she would sigh, but nonetheless she was still responsible for what she did with her life. Mark and Anthea married and settled down with baby Kayla after using her mother's monies to rebuild their lives. They built a house in the country and settled into a life of peaceful domestic tranquility. Anthea enjoyed her life as mommy to her perpetual baby, Kayla, and wife to her knight in shining armor, Mark. For a time, the angry Kayla screamed night and day in fury at her situation.